Hey gardeners, Amy here. Welcome to my garden. Today I want to talk about lavender, which is in the genus Lavandula. Normally I talk specifically about a specific plant species, but today I'm going to talk about the entire Lavandula genus just because there are differences between each species as far as size and bloom time, but for the most part, lavenders are very similar, and to do a separate video for each one would just be very inefficient. The best way to choose a good lavender, I think, would be from comparing a legit list. So today I'm going to talk about several different species of lavender that are common in my area that I know very well here in Spokane, and then you can compare which one's best for your garden. Most lavenders are native to Europe, specifically mostly around the Mediterranean. As far as I know, there are no lavenders that are native to the United States or even North America or even this hemisphere, to be perfectly honest. But they're usually well behaved and they mostly stay in the garden. However, there are some areas of the world where lavenders have escaped and they are becoming invasive. I think it's Australia is one of them, but they're considered to be well behaved here. I have seen them seed if you leave the seed heads on, and I have seen those seeds regrow. So it has the potential to escape a garden, but I don't think they'll survive well, at least not in Spokane, without irrigation. As a seedling, once they're established, they're very drought tolerant, but as a seedling, I don't think they'll really make it to maturity without at least a little bit of supplemental irrigation. That's in Spokane. In areas with more rainfall and more humidity or whatever, that may not be the case. But lavender is one of those plants that we've been importing from Europe for hundreds of years and has not made it on any invasive species lists, so you should be pretty safe. The varieties that I'm most familiar with are Lavandula angustifolia Munstead, which has a USDA zone of 5 through 9. It typically grows 1 to 2 feet tall and about 2 to 3 feet wide. It flowers in late spring to earlier midsummer, only once. I planted this one years ago. I don't know where the tag is, and I unfortunately didn't keep good records for my own garden. Oh, wait, I lied. He's right here. Ha! It is Munstead. I thought so. So I was going to say I thought this was Munstead, but now I've confirmed. This one is a Munstead lavender, so it gets about 1 to 2 feet high and about 2 to 3 feet wide. It blooms only once in the mid-spring, and I actually missed it at its prime, which is a real shame because it was gorgeous. But I do have several pictures of it. Lavandula angustifolia hidcoat is zoned 5 through 9. It gets about 1 to 2 feet high and wide, so it's a little bit less wide than Munstead, and it flowers in late spring to early or midsummer. There are several varieties of Lavandula angustifolia. There's a pink one, a white one. There is, I think, at least 5 or 6, specifically of angustifolia varieties. And it's a really hardy group of lavenders, so it's worth growing. I really like these ones. Next, I have a couple of crosses or hybrids. Now, I'm not sure what these are crossed with, but they are hybridized for a specific trait, and they have created its own variety. So I'm going to talk about those because they're quite common in our nurseries. Lavandula intermedia hidcoat giant. The flower spikes can be 4 inches long on this one. It's zoned 5 through 8. Size is 2 to 3 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide, so much bigger than your typical lavender. And it flowers from mid to late summer. Next is Lavandula intermedia, phenomenal. Its zone is 5 through 9. It grows 2 to 3 feet high and wide, and it flowers from midsummer well into fall. So this one has a longer bloom time than is typical of lavenders. And my last hybrid cross is Lavandula intermedia grosso. This grows in zones 5 through 8. It grows 2 to 3 feet high and wide, and it flowers mid to late summer. Last, I do want to mention Lavandula stoicus, which is the French or Spanish lavenders. It's called French lavender in Europe, from what I understand, but it's called Spanish lavender here in the States. I've heard it called both, honestly. It's sold has a perennial, and it is technically a perennial, but it is not nearly as hardy as the angustifolia lavenders. Its zone is typically like 7 or 8, so it doesn't survive our cold winters here in Spokane. I know we have just been updated to a zone 7. French lavender is not going to survive here. So if you buy a French lavender, understand that it is likely going to grow as an annual, or you're going to have to overwinter it in your garage or take other special precautions. French lavender also has a different flower shape. It has these really long petals at the top The petals are actually bracts, and it's at the top of each flower head or inflorescence. And many gardeners say they look like bunny ears, so they're called ears. I think it looks like it's wearing a cool, goofy, feathered hat. But whatever. They are neat looking, and they're actually the most showy of the lavenders because of those big petals. But just understand that they're not likely to come back next year. Lavandula is the lavender genus with about 47 species. It's in the Lamiaceae, or the mint or sage family, and it is native to Europe. Flowers and leaf shapes will vary per species. Size also varies, and they may grow 1 to 4 feet tall and 1 to about 4 feet wide, depending on the species. The entire plant is fragrant, and the showy summer flowers are a bee magnet. It's a semi-woody plant, and sometimes it's a shrub, sometimes it's considered other types of plants. It is evergreen. It typically has narrow gray-green leaves. They grow about up to 2.5 inches long on square stems. That's how you can always tell a plant is in the Lamiaceae family, when it has square stems. You can put your fingers on either side of the stem and roll the stem between your fingers, and you'll feel it pop from like the square shape. It'll like bounce between your fingers. The flowers are typically purple, but can be white or pink. They appear in terminal spikes at the end of each stem. Both the foliage and the flowers are highly aromatic, and the leaves are evergreen in warm winter climates. The genus name comes from the Latin word lavo, meaning I wash, in reference to a former use of the plant as an aromatic addition to a bath. The specific epithet, angustifolia, means having narrow leaves. How to grow and care for your lavender. Now, this part is really important. Lavender hate having wet feet, meaning they don't like heavy soils, they don't like wet soils, especially not waterlogged soils. They will die. Lavender likes a lightweight, sandy, well-drained soil. Loam is fine, but not clay. You want to let it dry out between waterings, and it's actually very drought tolerant. So back in this corner of my yard, and I even have it over in the xeric side of my yard, this gets watered about every 1 to 2-ish weeks whenever I remember to water it. Whenever I find something that looks thirsty and I remember, hey, I should probably put a hose over here, that's when I water this. Over in my xeric bed, it gets watered 4 to 5 times per year. That's it. I water it around the 1st of July and the 1st of each month after that until winter, and that's all it gets. And the lavender over there does fine. It's not quite as big as this one, but it's still growing, it's still blooming, and it's still gorgeous. So absolutely love lavender for xeric beds. It's very useful, it's very hardy. It does need full sun. It does not tolerate shade well, and it'll get floppy and leggy if you try to grow it in the shade. As far as pH goes, lavender prefers a pretty moderate range of like 6 to 8. It'll grow in most soils. As far as care goes, almost zero. It will need pruning at some point, but the timing of the pruning is completely up to you. A lot of people prune it as soon as it's done flowering. If they're going to use the flowers for things, it's typically pruned when it's flowering, when the flowers are at their peak. That's fine. If you're using the flowers, go ahead and do that. Pruning it right after flowering keeps the plant mound really tidy. It stays well behaved, and it usually stays more compact. You can prune it before winter if you want to leave these interesting flower heads up until winter, or you can do what I do now and actually leave the flower heads all the way through the following spring. What this does is it leaves the seeds as forage for our birds. Now, this comes with the hazard of leaving the seeds to fall on the ground and reseed, potentially creating a weed situation. But this is completely up to you. None of these are right or wrong. You need to do what's best for your situation, but you have several options for this. The tools you're going to want to use for pruning, again, it depends on your preference and it depends on the size of the plant. If you have a small lavender, you could totally do it with hand pruners. A big one like this, I would use scissor hedgers. I have an entire video specifically on how to prune lavender, so check that out right here. The reason we want to prune lavender is because if you don't prune it, it'll get leggy and floppy, and it tends to lose its vigor and it loses its shape. The one thing to absolutely remember, though, is to not cut deep into the old wood. Unless it's dead, leave it alone. If it's dead, go ahead and cut it out. But cutting deep into that wood will absolutely damage the plant, and it'll have a hard time recovering from hard cuts like that. I didn't find any references to specific pollinators or species that lavender hosts in the United States, probably because it's not native to the United States. but it is absolutely loved by many generalist pollinators, including bumblebees, and honeybees love it because, of course, they do. Honeybees are European, so of course they love a European plant. But it's visited by many of our native bees as well, and butterflies and moths. Lavender also has lots of other uses for us as humans, culinary uses, so we use it in foods and drinks, soaps, oils, and herbalism as different medicines. None of these are my specialties or anything, so I'm not going to get into details about those, but I will mention them, and if you want more information on that, you can do further research on your own. Let's talk design. Where should you put this in your garden? So it depends on the variety of lavender, but for the most part, this is blooming in the mid to late spring through the summer. When my Munstead lavender here was blooming, it was blooming at the same time as my evening primroses, my blue star Amsonia, my scarlet gilia was finishing up. Irises were going at the same time, and Baptista. There were a few other things as well, but that was really what was going gangbusters when this was opening. Now, since this is purple, I highly recommend planting it next to something yellow or orange, something opposite itself on the color wheel. Because when you have a color combination that's opposite itself on the color wheel, that creates complementary colors, which visually pop. They make your eyes look at them, and they make fantastic focal points. So putting my lavender right next to my evening primrose, purple next to yellow, creates a complementary color combination, and it makes a focal point. So I highly recommend doing some kind of combination like that for maximum visual interest in your garden. All right, guys, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you learned something new, make sure to tell me by hitting the like button. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments down below. And if you have not already done so, please subscribe so you get more gardening content like this in your video feed every week. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you in the garden.